The golden sunlight filtered through the narrow streets of Seville, warming the ancient cobblestones as I walked home from work. The scent of orange blossoms lingered in the air, mixing with the distant strum of a flamenco guitar. This was my city, my life, and soon it was supposed to be our future. My name is Clara Morales, a primary school teacher who had spent the past 4 years loving the same man with all her heart. His name was Alejandro Rios. Tall, charming, with a mischievous grin and a voice that could melt the coldest winter. We met at a friend's tapas night and had been inseparable ever since. He wasn't perfect. God knows he had a temper and a frustrating tendency to avoid serious talks, but I believed in the man beneath the flaws. I believed in us. We'd spoken about marriage countless times, even browsed flats together in Santa Cruz. I thought it was only a matter of time before he proposed. That time came on a rainy Tuesday evening, just as I'd given up expecting it. I had been marking homework when he walked into my flat with a bouquet of red carnations and a crooked smile. "I can't wait any longer, Clara," he'd said, dropping to one knee. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred my vision as I nodded.
Yes.
1,000 times yes. He placed the ring on my finger, a delicate gold band with a small sapphire, his mother's, and we toasted with cheap cava and leftover paella. I didn't care about the details. I was his fiancée. I was going to be Señora Rios. The months that followed were a blur of wedding planning and family dinners. My mother cried every time she saw the dress. Alejandro's abuela gave me her pearl earrings. We set a date for early spring, in a chapel overlooking the Guadalquivir River. But somewhere along the way, I began to notice things. Alejandro was distant. Not always, but enough for me to feel it. He worked late more often. He flinched when I mentioned the ceremony. He snapped at small things, like the wrong wine I bought or the flowers I chose for the centerpieces. I tried to brush it off. Cold feet, nerves, the pressure of everything coming together. Then came the night that changed everything. We were at a friend's engagement party in Córdoba. Music played, laughter filled the air, and I was sipping sangria under the stars when I caught sight of Alejandro across the patio. He wasn't alone. A woman stood close to him. Very close. Too close. They weren't touching, but the way she looked at him, like he was hers, sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Alejandro didn't pull away. He smiled. That smile, it was not for me. When he finally noticed me watching, he walked over, his face unreadable. I asked who she was. "Just someone from work," he said, far too casually.
I didn't press it that night.
But the doubt had been planted, and it would grow like a weed. I had no idea that within weeks, the man who had promised forever would look me in the eye and say the words that shattered me. "You're not worthy of being my wife." The morning after the party in Córdoba, the atmosphere between Alejandro and me was thick with tension. He left early, muttering something about a meeting in Malaga. No kiss.
No goodbye.
Just the echo of the door slamming shut behind him. I stood in the kitchen, staring blankly at the untouched toast on my plate. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone. I needed to speak with someone, anyone. I dialed my best friend, Lucia, who answered on the first ring. "You sound awful," she said gently. I told her everything. The woman at the party, Alejandro's mood, the way he looked at me like a stranger. Lucia didn't hesitate. "Something's off, Clara. You need to talk to him. Properly. Before it's too late." I knew she was right. That evening, I waited for him, pacing the living room like a prisoner waiting for her sentence. When he finally came home, I could smell the cologne that wasn't the one I'd bought him. His eyes were tired, cold. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. He sighed, throwing his keys on the table. "If this is about the party, it's not just that. It's everything. You've changed, Alejandro." There was a long silence before he spoke. "Maybe I have." I stared at him, heart pounding. "What does that mean?" He looked away, jaw clenched. "It means I'm not sure this is what I want anymore." The floor felt like it vanished beneath me. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "You don't want to get married? I don't think you're the right person for me, Clara." His words sliced through me. I could barely breathe. After everything, after 4 years? You've become comfortable, he said, as if it were a flaw. Predictable. I don't feel challenged. Challenged? I repeated, incredulous. You said you wanted peace.
A home.
A future. I thought I did, but now I see you're not the woman I need. It was cruel. He said it so matter-of-factly, as though I were a pair of shoes that no longer fit. I felt humiliation rising like bile. I gave you everything, I whispered. I changed my plans for you. I loved you. And I appreciate that, he said coldly. But it's not enough. Tears welled in my eyes. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but all I could do was nod, numb. He walked past me, grabbed a suitcase from the closet, and began packing.
Just like that.
I'll stay at a hotel for now, he said, not meeting my eyes. You can keep the flat. And the ring. The ring. The symbol of everything he promised, now worthless. He left without another word, and I stood in the silence he left behind, unable to move. I collapsed onto the sofa, clutching the ring like a lifeline, the tears finally falling. That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, the grief had turned to fury. No one, no man, was going to break me this way and walk away unscathed. The days that followed were a blur of silence and whispers. Word of our broken engagement spread fast in Cordoba. Some called to offer sympathy, others out of curiosity. I ignored most of them. What could they possibly say that would help? Lucia came over every evening, bringing food I never touched and hugs I didn't know I needed. You have every right to be angry, she said as she poured us both a glass of wine one night. He humiliated you. Left you like yesterday's news. But why? I muttered, staring at the untouched wine. Why now, after everything we went through? Lucia gave me a hesitant look. You remember the woman from the party? The one in red? My stomach twisted. The one who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover? She's not from our circle. No one knew her. But someone saw Alejandro with her, a week before the party, at a hotel in Seville. I froze. A hotel? Lucia nodded slowly. It could be nothing, but it could be everything.
The thought gnawed at me.
Suddenly, memories I'd brushed aside began to resurface. Late meetings, unexplained trips, a new cologne, his sudden obsession with fitness. Was it all for her? I couldn't sit still. That night, after Lucia left, I opened Alejandro's laptop, still left on the desk, carelessly. No password change. He hadn't even thought to lock me out. I searched emails first. Nothing obvious. Then his messages. Buried in a folder titled Work Trips were photos of her. Sun-kissed skin, laughing on a boat, dressed in that same red dress. Him beside her, arm around her waist. My stomach flipped. One of the photos was time-stamped 2 days before our engagement party. I covered my mouth to keep from crying out. He hadn't just fallen out of love. He had fallen into someone else's bed while pretending to plan a future with me. The betrayal burned through my chest. My hands trembled as I closed the laptop, rage flooding my veins. I thought I'd feel broken. Instead, I felt awake. Let him have her, I thought. Let him have the lies. I wasn't going to crumble. I was going to rise. But not for him. For me. The next morning, the sun rose over Cordoba with golden indifference. I, however, felt anything but warm. The pain in my chest had settled into something cold, something precise. I no longer wept. I planned. Alejandro hadn't returned home since the night of the party. His things were still scattered in the flat. His cologne lingered in the air like a ghost I wanted to banish. But before I could tear down what remained of him, I needed answers. Closure, not from him, but from myself. I took the train to Seville. It was a spontaneous decision, yet it felt necessary. If they'd been seen there, I needed to see it with my own eyes. Needed to walk the same streets where my trust had been shattered. The hotel wasn't hard to find. Elegant. Discreet. I stood across the street for a long while, just staring. imagining them laughing under its chandeliers, toasting to stolen time. It made my skin crawl. Inside, I approached the reception desk with an air of quiet confidence. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm trying to reach my fiancé. He stayed here recently. Alejandro Vargas." The woman at the desk frowned slightly. "One moment," she typed, then paused. "He was here last week, with a Miss Valentina Cruz." The name slapped me. So it had a name. The woman. The betrayal. Everything now had a face, a voice, and a booking history. I thanked her and left. In the plaza outside the hotel, I sat on a stone bench and watched people pass. Tourists, couples, mothers with prams. All of them moving through a world that no longer made sense to me. And yet, amidst the confusion, I felt something shift. I hadn't come to confront him. Or her. I'd come to reclaim myself. To stand where he had betrayed me and say, quietly but surely, that I would not let it define me. That evening, I returned to Cordoba and began packing his belongings. Each shirt folded with methodical calm. Each memory tucked away in a box I would never open again. Lucia helped me carry everything to the hallway. She didn't speak, just held the door while I placed the last box down. I texted him once simply, "Your things are in the hall. Pick them up before the weekend." No anger. No pleading. Just the sound of a woman done waiting. As I locked the door behind me, something inside finally clicked into place. Not closure. Power. And I was ready to use it. A week had passed since I sent the message. Alejandro never replied, but the boxes disappeared overnight. That suited me fine. His silence was the last sound I needed from him. Lucia encouraged me to focus on my art again. "Let it speak for you," she said.
So I did.
I poured everything into my canvases, anger, grief, betrayal, all twisted into color and movement. My studio became a confessional, each stroke of the brush a release. It was during this time that I received a call from Mateo Delgado, a well-known curator in Madrid. He'd heard about my recent exhibition and wanted to feature my work in a summer showcase. I nearly dropped the phone. "Your latest pieces are raw, honest," he said. "They tell a story." Yes, they did. A story of someone who had burned, but who refused to be reduced to ashes. The opening night in Madrid came quickly. Lucia accompanied me, dressed in black silk, radiant and proud. The gallery buzzed with soft chatter, the clink of glasses, the hum of admiration. People paused in front of my paintings with thoughtful expressions, whispering to one another. And then I heard it, his voice. "Alejandro." I turned slowly, wine glass steady in my hand. He was there, near the entrance, wearing a navy suit and a face he hadn't earned the right to bring. Next to him was Valentina, poised like a painting herself, expression unreadable. He looked at the centerpiece of the exhibition, my boldest work, one painted after my trip to Seville. A skyline bathed in red, two shadowy figures beneath it, faceless and cold. He realized. I approached them, heels clicking against the marble floor. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said coolly. "I didn't know you'd be showing," he replied, clearly rattled. Valentina looked between us, then away. "Well, now you do," I answered, then turned to Valentina. "Beautiful city, Seville. Full of secrets." She stiffened. Alejandro said nothing. There was no scene. No tears. I didn't need them anymore. I walked away before he could speak again, letting him choke on the silence I once begged to fill. Later that night, Mateo raised his glass to me. "You've transformed," he said. "There's something in you now."
Strength.
Fire. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Real and whole. I had been broken open, yes, but not destroyed. And in that gallery, surrounded by strangers who saw me without knowing the scars, I felt it for the first time. Freedom. The gallery buzz faded into memory, but something had shifted inside me for good. I no longer woke with a hollow in my chest. My days were full. Of paint, of purpose, of possibility. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone's approval. Then the letter arrived. It came in a thick cream envelope, my name written in ink that looked almost too careful. There was no return address, but the postmark was from Granada. I stared at it for several minutes before opening it. Inside was a single page. Clara, you deserve the truth. I don't expect forgiveness. But I couldn't leave things like this. Valentina. I froze. My eyes darted over the words, reading and rereading, waiting for some deeper meaning to rise to the surface. Truth? What truth? I turned the page over. Nothing else. Lucia, curious, watched me from the sofa. What is it? I hesitated, then handed her the letter. She read it quickly, then met my gaze. She wants to talk. I'm not sure I care to hear it, I said. But the doubt had already planted its seed. Was there more to the betrayal than I'd thought? Some twisted backstory? Lies upon lies? Lucia shrugged. If you don't want to know, burn it. But if you do, meet her. On your terms. That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, I had made my decision. 2 days later, I was on a train to Granada, the letter tucked into my bag like a relic I couldn't let go of. The city welcomed me with golden hills and narrow, winding streets. I checked into a modest guest house near the Alhambra and waited for the sun to soften into dusk. We agreed to meet at a small cafe by the river. She arrived late. Valentina looked different without Alejandro beside her.
Smaller.
Older. More real. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said as she sat down. I almost didn't, I replied. There was a silence between us, heavy and strange. Then she leaned forward. I didn't know about you. Not at first. He told me you were separated. That things had been over for months. I laughed, short and bitter. Of course he did. But when I found out, I ended it. I confronted him. He begged me to keep quiet. Said you were fragile. That you wouldn't handle the truth. That word again.
Truth.
He played us both, she added quietly. And when I saw your exhibition in Madrid, I realized you deserved more than silence. I didn't know what I had expected, an apology, perhaps. A fight. But what I got was something else. A reflection of myself. A woman misled, manipulated, discarded. We parted without fanfare. No forgiveness. Just understanding. That evening, I stood on a terrace overlooking the city, the rooftops glowing beneath the fading sun. I thought of all the lies I believed, and how, step by step, I was learning to believe myself again. Back in Madrid, something had shifted within me. I had gone to Granada expecting confrontation, perhaps closure. But what I'd found instead was clarity. Alejandro wasn't the storm. He was only the wind that knocked over my walls. The real rebuilding had always been mine to do. Days passed. I painted more than ever, pouring every color of my heart onto the canvas. My apartment smelled of oils and citrus, the windows open to spring. Lucia suggested I submit a new series to a gallery she'd once worked with. It's different now, she said. You're not just painting loss. You're painting truth. I titled the collection La Mujer Despierta, The Woman Awakens. But as I prepared the works for submission, I found myself lingering on one unfinished piece. A self-portrait. Half in shadow, half in light. My expression unreadable. Not quite angry. Not quite serene. I couldn't bring myself to finish it. One afternoon, while organizing my studio, I found something odd. A notebook. Leather-bound, dusty, wedged behind a stack of old sketchbooks. I opened it slowly. The first pages were familiar, studies of Madrid rooftops, scribbled lines from years ago. But then, further in, I found entries in Alejandro's handwriting. I nearly dropped it. The dates suggested it was from our early years, when we were still newly married, still in love. Curiosity overpowered revulsion. Clara says she dreams of painting full-time. I admire her spirit, but she has no idea how cruel the art world can be. She cried today after her portfolio was rejected. I told her it wasn't meant to be. I can't tell if she hears me anymore. Sometimes I wonder if I've made her too dependent on my opinion. I don't mean to crush her, but maybe I am. My throat tightened. Each sentence felt like a blade sharpened with passive pity. Another page. Met a woman at the architecture conference.
Bright. Confident.
So different from Clara lately. I feel ashamed,
But also alive.
I slammed the book shut. He had documented his betrayal as if it were a private science experiment, observing my pain with detached curiosity, rationalizing his erosion of me. I felt sick. Lucia found me sitting on the floor hours later, the book still clutched in my lap. I thought I had stopped letting him in, I whispered. But he left rot in the walls. She knelt beside me. Then it's time to tear them down. All of them. I stood the next morning in front of my unfinished self-portrait. For hours, I painted. My hands shook. My heart raced. I didn't stop. When I finally stepped back, the woman in the frame looked back at me with unflinching defiance. No longer half in shadow.
She was all light now.
The opening night of La Mujer Despierta drew more visitors than I had dared imagine. The gallery buzzed with murmurs of admiration and curiosity, wine glasses clinking, heels echoing softly against the stone floor. I stood near the back, watching from behind a column as strangers read my soul laid bare across every canvas. My name was printed on the small white plaques next to each painting. Not as Alejandro's wife. Not as a silent muse. Just Clara Martin. Lucia stood proudly by the front, guiding conversations with her usual sparkle. That one, she said to a well-dressed couple, pointing at the self-portrait. She finished it in one night. Said it was like tearing down a house with a single brush. I smiled faintly, nerves dancing in my chest. Then I saw him. Alejandro. He stood just inside the doorway, stiff in his tailored jacket alone. Our eyes met briefly, and for a second, I saw confusion ripple across his face. Not recognition. Not regret. Just confusion. He didn't walk in right away. Perhaps he expected me to come to him. I didn't. Minutes later, he wandered past the first painting. A woman seated on a balcony, eyes closed to the sun. Then another, hands covered in paint, shaping something unseen. Then he stopped in front of the final piece. The self-portrait. His expression twisted. I moved beside him, slowly. I didn't speak until I could hear his breath catch. You kept that notebook, I said quietly. He flinched. You read it? Yes. Silence. The buzz of the crowd felt distant, like the echo of waves behind thick glass. I didn't write it to hurt you, he murmured. It was a way to make sense of things. I kept my eyes on the painting. You didn't want to understand me. You wanted to explain me away. You needed a reason to leave, so you wrote one for yourself. He said nothing. A woman approached him, tall, confident, the same one I had seen in Granada. She placed a hand lightly on his arm. Ready to go? He gave me one last glance. Not angry, not proud, just small. I turned away before he could say anything else. That night, La Mujer Despierta sold out. Every piece claimed. But I kept the self-portrait. It didn't belong to anyone else. Later, after the guests had left and the gallery lights dimmed, Lucia and I sat on the floor, sipping cava from plastic cups. You think that was closure? She asked. No, I replied. That was me turning the page. I didn't need applause. I didn't need an apology. I had finally painted the last word of a story he no longer had the power to write. The morning after the exhibition, the air felt different. Lighter. Almost as if the weight of the past had evaporated overnight, leaving nothing but space for new beginnings. I woke to the sound of the sea crashing against the rocks outside, the salty breeze slipping through the cracks in the shutters. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Lucia had insisted on a celebratory brunch, and we gathered at a small cafe by the beach. The tables were scattered with fresh croissants, fruit, and warm coffee. The scent of salt lingered in the air, mingling with the soft hum of early morning conversation. Clara, you did it. Lucia beamed as she poured a generous amount of champagne into my glass. The world finally knows your name. I smiled, but it wasn't pride that filled me. It was a deep, quiet satisfaction. Do you feel different? Lucia asked, leaning in with curiosity. I feel like I've finally met myself, I said softly. Like I've stopped living through someone else's eyes. Lucia nodded, sensing the shift in me. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. And what now? I took a slow breath, letting the question sink in.
What now?
The gallery had been a release, a confirmation of everything I'd been through. But it was also a step into something unknown. Without the confines of Alejandro's shadow, I had space to breathe, to become something I hadn't imagined for myself before. I said, I'm going to leave. Lucia blinked, as if the words hadn't quite processed. Leave?
Yes.
Barcelona. Her brow furrowed. But your work here is just beginning. You've made a name for yourself. People want more from you. I knew, but my heart was already elsewhere. The city no longer felt like home to me. It had become a place where I had hidden, not lived. I need to go somewhere I can find my own rhythm, I explained. I need silence. Solitude. I want to paint without any distractions, without anyone trying to tell me what I should be. Lucia was quiet for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. Finally, she gave a slow nod. Then go. Find what you're looking for. I'll be here when you're ready to come back. I felt a small smile tug at the corner of my lips. Thank you. We spent the rest of the morning discussing my plans, but my mind was already on the horizon. Alejandro had gone. He'd faded into the past, where he belonged. And me? I was finally free. As the last drop of champagne hit my lips, I felt a wave of clarity. This was the first day of the rest of my life. The days that followed felt like the start of something entirely new. I packed my belongings, leaving behind the life that had once been a cage. The apartment, the gallery, even the memories of Alejandro. Everything began to fade like the last remnants of a dream. My destination was simple. A small village in the mountains, far from the chaos of the city, where I could focus on what truly mattered. The first morning in the village, I woke to the chirping of birds outside my window. There was no honking of cars, no rush of people walking the streets. Just the soft, rhythmic pulse of nature. I walked through the village, my boots crunching on the gravel path, the fresh air filling my lungs. It was exactly what I had imagined: peace, solitude, and space to think.
To create.
In the evenings, I would sit on the porch, paintbrush in hand, and lose myself in the strokes of color. Each brushstroke felt like an act of defiance, as if I were painting away the remnants of my past, layer by layer. Over the next few weeks, I found a rhythm. It wasn't the frantic pace of the city, nor was it the chaotic rush I had once been accustomed to. It was gentle, quiet, measured. Lucia kept in touch, her messages filled with updates from Barcelona, but her words were always warm and encouraging. I shared my progress with her, the paintings that were slowly beginning to take shape. One afternoon, as I stood on the edge of the village, gazing out at the distant mountains, I realized that I had become someone new. I wasn't the woman Alejandro had tried to shape, nor the person who had hidden behind the walls of the gallery. I was just me, Clara. For the first time in a long while, I was truly living. Not for anyone else, but for myself.
And it was enough.
The phone rang one evening as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor of my studio. I glanced at the screen and saw Lucia's name. Clara, she said, her voice soft but filled with excitement. I have good news. Your work, it's been picked up for an exhibition in Paris. They're asking for you to be there. What do you think?
Paris.
The thought of it stirred something deep inside me. For a moment, I was silent, the weight of the decision pressing on my chest. I had found peace in this small village. I had found myself. But maybe it was time for me to share my art with the world. I'll go, I said, finally. It's time. And as I hung up the phone, I knew that this was only the beginning. The world was waiting, and so was I. This time, it was on my terms.